When I was around 10 years old, my family and I lived in a small apartment complex in the suburbs of a major city in the US. I won't name the state or city as I'm a very paranoid person and don't want people knowing my address. This happened around 6 years ago, and one of my closest friends who I knew for years was moving over 2,000 miles away. We'll call him Ivan. Since I wouldn't be seeing him as much, we both planned to throw a sleepover at his house to say our final goodbyes and whatnot. Now, his current house was pretty nice with a big backyard and pool and was in a very nice place. While the location might have been nice, it wasn't all that it seemed. The area and the city itself had a high crime rate and something would happen every week. There would be motor vehicle theft, break-ins, robberies, and even a murder once in a while. It was a nice place, but it definitely wasn't somewhere you'd want to be walking around at night. Anyway, my parents had dropped me off at Ivan's house at around 8 p.m. and we start to watch a movie on the TV in the living room. We're about halfway through the movie when we hear a heavy knock at the door and my friend's mom goes to answer it. She seemed hesitant at first, but she opens the door and tells whoever it was that they needed to leave. She argues with them quietly for a good minute before shutting the door and locking it while walking away visibly stressed. I look over to Ivan drinking his Capri Sun and asked him who his mom was talking to which he then shrugs his shoulders saying, "I don't know." We continue to watch our movie while his mom packs, and it eventually comes to the time where we had to go to sleep. Ivan's room had the second biggest room on the second floor, and that room was huge. With me being the guest and his best friend, he let me sleep on the top bunk, which turned out to be much more comfortable than I thought. We are well asleep at this point, and for some unknown reason, I wake up. Of course, I'm still tired while yawning and rubbing my eyes to adjust to the darkness in the room. I climb down the ladder to grab my water bottle from my bag when I look out the window and see that it was fully open. Now, the AC was already on, and neither of us had opened the window for any reason. The only thing I could think of was that it was his mom who must have forgotten to shut it. Without hesitation, I closed the window, thinking nothing of it, and tried to go back to sleep. However, for some reason, I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried, even with my sleeping medicine. After constantly rolling around in the bed trying to find a good sleeping position, I finally fell back asleep. It wasn't until an hour later when we woke up to hear the blood-curdling scream of Ivan's mom. Ivan, being the man of the house, grabs his pocket knife and I follow behind. We run down into the kitchen and see a dirty-looking man holding Ivan's mom while covering her mouth. At this point, Ivan was likely having a fight-or-flight experience and wasn't sure what to do. This guy was massive and could probably take on 2 young kids with ease. Just then, one of the neighbors, a retired police officer, opens the front door and immediately jumps the man. Needless to say, the fight was over in a matter of seconds, with the officer throwing a few good blows to the man's head. Police had arrived soon after, and he was taken away to some institution. Turns out, this guy was a registered sex offender and had been in and out of jail several times for stalking and harassing. He was released a few months ago for good behavior. He was given and accepted a deal from the county attorney office with the following conditions. 1. To follow all restraining orders. 2. Not to contact the victims or their families. 3. He would be on probation for 5 years. Thankfully, he was put in jail again, but I wasn't sure how long he'd be staying there for. Ivan ended up moving the next week, and we eventually moved elsewhere so my brother could go to college. I no longer speak with Ivan, but this was one of the scariest experiences that's ever taken place. This happened when I was around 14 years old at the time. I've never actually told this story in full detail to anyone, fearing that they think I'm crazy or overdramatic. It was the fall of 2008, and my family and I had moved to a really small town in Massachusetts. We never liked the city and preferred to live in a quiet community where there were no major crowds or traffic. The town itself had a population of around 3,000 people to be exact, which is just the thing we were looking for. The neighborhood was surrounded by forest in all directions and was about a 15-minute drive to the nearest store. During our first week of living there, we met one of our neighbors who also had a kid. His name was Andy, who was just a little older than I was, and we hit it off well. We both had the same interests and ended up becoming like two peas in a pod. One night, Andy had called me to ask if I wanted to sleep over at his house since he'd be pitching a new tent in the backyard. I wasn't too big on the idea of sleeping outside, but it was a nice night, so I reluctantly agreed. It was surprisingly a bit chilly out, and just as I was about to go to bed, Andy recommends we get his camera and go film an expedition. Now, YouTube was only about a few years old at the time, so we both figured that if we did find something interesting, we'd get a lot of hits. For the first 20 minutes or so, Andy filmed us wandering through the woods, listening for strange sounds and whatnot. We didn't expect to find anything and kinda just did it for fun. Then about 10 minutes go by and we come across a fallen tree by some thick deadfall. As I'm pointing out the tree to the camera, I see that Andy is completely stone-faced, not moving a muscle. His hands were shaking and his eyes were wild. I ask in a confused tone if he was okay, and he says 3 words that still haunt me till this day. Don't turn around. His response made my blood run cold, and I couldn't help but turn around to see what he was looking at. I turned around ever so slowly and saw for the briefest second something small and gray take off fast back into the woods. Andy turns off the camera light and tells me to run back to the house. We keep running non-stop back in the direction of the house until reaching the back door. We get inside the house and Andy and I review the footage that he had taken. He was only able to get a glimpse of whatever it was in full view before it took off. The picture will be on screen now. At first we thought that it could have been a coyote with mange of some sort, but based on the image it looked more human than dog. Andy estimated the creature to be around 4 feet tall with long legs and arms with an oval-shaped head. Till this day, we still don't know what it was we saw in those woods. I've heard stories about the Dover Demon or the rake sightings in the northern states of the US, but I've always dismissed them as old folklore. I still don't believe in those things. But after seeing that picture, I don't really know what to think. This happened about a year ago when I was 19 and in college. My family and I had moved to an old house in the suburbs of New York. It wasn't anything too special, just your average house appropriate for a family of 4. We never liked the city due to being constantly overwhelmed by thousands of people bumping into you. With New York being the most populated city, we definitely avoided it at all costs. My parents both worked in the medical field and worked very long hours taking care of patients, and with the virus spreading, they would sometimes have to work overtime. This meant that me and my brother would be home alone for very long hours of the day and night. Most people would probably think that it was annoying staying in the house for that long, but we got along well. My brother was 7 at the time, and we always looked up to each other for guidance. One night, 3 of his friends around his age came over to our house for a sleepover as summer was upon us and they had been planning it for a while now. With my parents being at work and not at home, I had to watch over them to make sure everything went okay. All I did was sit at my computer playing video games and checking up on them every now and then. For the most part, they seemed to be chill while doing, I guess, whatever 7-year-olds do for fun. Fast forward till about an hour later, they suddenly went quiet, as if a switch were turned off. Thinking that they may have broken something in the room, I go over and ask the 3 of them if everything was okay. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I closed the door wanting to go back to my game. And that's when it hit me. There were only 3 of them. I stormed back in, only to find Anthony, one of my brother's friends, gone, along with the window open. At this point, I'm losing my shit, asking where the hell he went. What they said sent a chill down my spine. Oh, he went with the pirate to go find the treasure. He'll be back soon. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach as they told me this. I run outside the house, only to see a man I had never seen before dressed in all black grabbing Anthony by the arm. As soon as he spots me, he lets go and takes off down the road, and I never saw him again. I take Anthony back to the house and demanded an explanation from all of them while my anger was through the roof. They had said a man had come to their window and asked them to help him find the treasure, which of course was a total lie. I didn't know if he would be back or had more people with him, but I didn't feel safe with the sleepover anymore. I called every parent, including mine, and told them about the whole incident. Most of them were shocked, but Anthony's parents obviously gave me some criticism but thanked me for stopping it. Needless to say, my parents were furious, having to leave work early, and I wasn't allowed to watch over my brother anymore. We have since moved out of that house a month later to a different neighborhood, knowing that whoever that was knew where we lived.